It all happened so quickly. 1 second, everything was perfect. My wedding. The day I dreamed of since I was a little girl. The next, my brother Ethan grabbed the microphone without asking. And the words he spoke, Dad signed. My heart stopped in that moment, and I couldn't breathe. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. I was standing there in front of my new husband, Tom, about to say my vows when Ethan's voice cut through the air. I never thought my brother would cause a scene like this. But there he was, standing in the middle of the reception hall, the microphone in his hand, grinning like he already knew what was going to happen next. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't have possibly known, was who was standing behind me. Or the situation. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Tom, the love of my life, was waiting for me at the altar. Our families had gathered in the beautiful garden, and everything was just perfect. My dad, of course, was there too, always with his strong, protective presence. There was a slight tension, sure. My brother Ethan and I hadn't exactly been close for years. We'd always had our differences, and after everything that happened with Dad last year, things between us were strained. But I thought for one day at least we could put everything behind us. Today was about love, happiness, and new beginnings. Yet here I was, looking at my brother with a microphone in hand, my stomach sinking as I realized that what he was about to say could change everything. Our curiosity gap. Dad signed. Those 3 words were like a bomb dropping into the middle of a peaceful sea. No one knew what to say. The music faded away. The guests all turned in confusion, and my heart was racing. Why would Ethan bring up something like that right now, and what the heck was he talking about? There I was, frozen. I couldn't move. I didn't know what to do or say. My mind was racing. My brother wasn't just making a random speech. No, this was something big, something that could ruin everything. And then I realized Ethan didn't see who was standing right behind me. It was almost as if time slowed down. Everyone was waiting for the next words to come out of Ethan's mouth, and I had no idea how this was going to end. As I stood there, my body tense, my thoughts were spinning. I didn't know if I should confront him, walk away, or just pretend this was all a mistake. But then, that person behind me stepped forward, and that's when I realized this was no mistake. I couldn't take my eyes off Ethan. What was he going to say next? The tension was unbearable. Every second felt like an eternity as he stood there, looking so calm, so smug, like he had just won something. But what? And why did I feel like this was going to be the worst thing that ever happened to me? Expand situation and key relationships. To understand why this was so terrifying, you have to know a bit about my family. My dad, Gregory Lila, is a man who values control, reputation, and tradition. He's always been the pillar of our family. Firm, unwavering, and often distant. He never really understood me, but we got along because I was the good daughter. I'm the one who always tried to do things the right way. Then there's Ethan. He's always been different. Growing up, it was always me and my dad, trying to prove I could be just as strong and driven as him. But Ethan, he never cared about that. He didn't want to be in the spotlight. He didn't want to be what Dad expected him to be. I loved him for that, even though it often felt like he was more of a mystery than a brother. But after that huge fight last year, everything changed. Dad and Ethan got into it over some deal that my dad had made with his business partners, and the fallout was huge. It left me caught in the middle, trying to be the peacekeeper. Ethan didn't speak to Dad for months after that, and they'd only just started to act like everything was okay. I thought we were past all that. Then, here we are. I'm in front of all our friends and family, and Ethan grabs the mic. I thought this was going to be a normal wedding toast, something lighthearted and fun. Instead, he says, Dad signed. Subtle red flags. I watched his face closely, trying to figure out what was going through his mind. Ethan wasn't someone who spoke unless he had something serious to say. The way he was standing there, so calm, so certain, it was almost like he knew exactly how everything was going to play out. I could see it in his eyes. He was playing a game, and he had no intention of losing. But why here? Why now? The guests were starting to murmur. Some of them exchanged confused glances, unsure if they had heard him right. My stomach twisted in knots. Was he really about to do this at my wedding? Then I remembered he couldn't know the truth. No one could. When it was something that only my dad and I knew. Something that Ethan, for all his insight, had never been told. And then, as if on cue, someone stepped forward behind me. I didn't see them at first, but the audience did. The whispers in the crowd grew louder. I knew it was coming, but the reality of it still hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. Something bigger was happening, and it was about to change everything. The figure behind me stepped forward slowly, almost deliberately. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I turned just slightly, just enough to see the silhouette of someone I didn't expect to be there. And when the light hit their face, my world tilted. It was someone who had been absent from my life for years. Someone I thought I would never see again. Someone who, somehow, I had the power to make everything Ethan was saying feel like a dangerous truth. Escalating conflict. I wasn't prepared for this. No one was. The murmurs in the room grew louder, and I felt every single pair of eyes on me. Ethan had already set the stage with his cryptic words, but now this person, this stranger who wasn't supposed to be here, was about to make it all worse. "Dad signed a deal with me," the person said, their voice calm but cutting through the growing tension in the room. And it wasn't just about business, it's about what's happening today. I felt my breath catch in my throat. My father had made a deal? A deal that had something to do with my wedding? I tried to process what was happening, but the words wouldn't make sense. The whole room was silent now, hanging on every word. Ethan looked smug. I'm standing there like the world was finally falling into place for him. But I wasn't so sure. What was this about? What could be so important that my father would be involved in something like this? Something so secretive, so dangerous? My father's name had always been tied to power, to control. He didn't make deals lightly, and this? This didn't feel right. Not at all. Turning point/unexpected action. The stranger behind me took another step forward. "Your father doesn't know that I'm here," they said, their tone sharp, like a warning. "But I know everything about this little arrangement." I could hear the gasps around me. Even Tom, standing beside me, looked confused, his face pale. I could feel his hand tightening around mine, but I couldn't focus on him right now. I had to focus on this revelation, on this stranger. And Ethan's smile grew wider. I knew this day would come. I knew someone would show up to ruin this whole thing. But it's not my fault, Mimi. It's Dad's. Escalating stakes. I tried to focus on Ethan's words, but it was almost impossible. The stranger's presence, the tension in the air, the suspicion crawling through me. It was all too much to process at once. What did this mean? What was my father really involved in? How could this impact my marriage to Tom? Ethan seemed to think it was all part of a bigger plan, and if he was right, then my wedding day, my life, was built on a lie. I turned back toward the stranger, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed answers. I needed the truth. But as soon as I opened my mouth to speak, that's when it happened. I heard my father's voice from across the room, cutting through the tension. "Well, enough." He walked toward the mic, and every single eye in the room followed him. He was here now, and if I knew anything about my father, it was that when he spoke, people listened. This was about to get even more complicated. My heart pounded as my father approached the microphone. The room had fallen so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was waiting for him to speak, but what would he say? How would he explain what was happening? I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't going to be simple. Consequences begin to unfold. My father took the mic, his presence filling the entire room. He was every bit the man I remembered, strong, poised, but with an underlying tension I could see in his eyes. For a moment, I thought he might just deny everything, but then he spoke. Make his voice steady but filled with something else. Regret? "Mimi," he started, addressing me directly for the first time all evening. "I never wanted you to be caught in the middle of this. I never wanted you to know any of this." The room was dead silent. Even Ethan, who had been so certain of himself, now looked slightly uneasy. This was the moment I had been dreading, the moment I would finally learn the truth. But the truth, it wasn't anything like I expected. The deal I signed, my father continued, wasn't a business transaction. It was a personal arrangement, one I made to protect this family from some dangerous decisions I had made in the past. My mind raced. The deal wasn't what I thought it was. It wasn't about money. My father was involved in something deeper, something I didn't understand. The reveal set up. About your wedding, Mimi, my father said, his voice softening. I had no choice but to make certain arrangements. The truth is, I didn't want you to marry Tom this way. Not because I didn't love him or because I didn't want you to be happy, but because of something you don't know. Something that could have torn everything apart. I froze. What was he talking about? My entire life, my future, everything had felt so sure, so perfect. And now, in one sentence, it all felt like it was slipping away. Ethan, standing beside me, finally broke his silence. I told you it wasn't all what it seemed. The truth was buried too deep, and now, Mimi, you have to see it. But before I could respond, my father raised his hand, signaling for quiet. This was not going to be a casual revelation. This was something much bigger. Ethan, you don't fully understand, my father said, locking eyes with him. This deal, it's not just about protecting you or Mimi. It's about protecting everyone in this room. And now, I have to make one final choice. The air in the room thickened. What was he about to decide? And how would this affect everything I thought I knew? I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to drop out from beneath me. The silence that followed my father's words was deafening. Every single person in the room seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the truth to finally come to light. My mind raced as I looked back and forth between my father, Ethan, and the mysterious stranger behind me. This wasn't just about a business deal, like I'd feared, and it was about something much deeper. Something that had been lurking beneath the surface for years. Finally, my father spoke again, his voice steady but tinged with regret. The deal I made wasn't meant to ruin your happiness, Mimi. It was meant to keep you safe. There are powerful people involved in this, people who would stop at nothing to control your future. I made this arrangement to protect you, both of you. I felt a strange mix of relief and confusion. My father had been trying to protect me all this time? From what? From whom? The person standing behind you, my father continued, is someone who knows the whole story. They're here to ensure that you both understand the gravity of the situation. Ethan, you don't fully grasp what this means, but I do. And now I need to make sure you, Mimi, or understand the truth. Ethan looked stunned, his earlier smugness completely gone. So, everything I thought I knew was wrong? He asked, his voice quieter now, almost uncertain. My father nodded. Yes, Ethan, everything. This wasn't about betrayal or lies, it was about survival. Emotional payoff. A weight seemed to lift off my shoulders, but it was replaced by something else. Fear. The truth was out, but it only raised more questions. My father hadn't been trying to ruin my wedding. He'd been trying to shield me from something much worse. I turned to Tom, who had been quietly observing the whole situation. He looked at me, and I could see the confusion in his eyes. I knew he had questions, too. I could feel the tension between us, but at least for now, I wasn't alone in this. We had each other. Tears started to well up in my eyes. This wedding, the happiest day of my life, had turned into something I could never have imagined. But despite everything, despite the confusion and fear, I was still standing here, about to marry the man I loved. Consequence payoff. In the aftermath, the consequences of my father's secret deal became clear. The revelation of the deal led to a deep conversation between him and Ethan, and they finally started to rebuild the trust they had lost. As for the stranger, they didn't stay long after revealing the truth. They had done their part, and now it was up to my family to figure out how to move forward. Tom and I also had our own discussions. The fallout from the day's events was something we both needed to work through. I couldn't just move on without understanding everything that had been hidden from me. But as the dust began to settle, we both knew that the road ahead would be difficult. Trust had been shaken, but we had a foundation built on love, and that had to count for something. Final resolution moment. The wedding continued, but it was different. Less like a fairy tale and more like a turning point in our lives. My father and I had a private conversation later that night, and he apologized for keeping things from me for so long. He explained the fear he had, the fear of losing me to forces I couldn't comprehend. I understood, but I also knew that secrets, no matter how well intentioned, could never protect us forever. As the night wore on, Tom and I stood together, hand in hand. The reception buzzed with laughter and dancing, but in my heart, there was a new understanding. I wasn't just stepping into a marriage with Tom. I was stepping into a future where my family would have to learn how to be honest with each other. And maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what had been broken. When the night ended, I felt like a weight had been lifted. My life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to face them, with Tom by my side and a family that was slowly starting to heal.